Yo guys, what is up? Max on our Path of Exile 2 video, and today we got a massive amount of patch notes, including a bunch of buffs and changes to the Ranger class. There is a ton to talk about here, but I mainly just want to cover all of the changes that are specifically going to be affecting the Ranger class, as the class that I've been playing since launch. So I hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. Let's get right into it. One thing I did want to just make clear, because I'm seeing a lot of confusion about it, there is a note in these patch notes that says Electrocute is 25% harder to build up, but the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. Electrocute is a different ailment to enemies than Shock is. Shock is a damage multiplier that we are actively using in this build. Electrocute is not something that we are spec'd into. Electrocute makes enemies get stunned, and it is great for stunning bosses and stunning enemies, and by doing electric damage, we are, having a chance to electrocute enemies, but this shouldn't affect us. It's not going to affect our, cast on shock or anything like that, or our damage, because one, we're not spec'd into it, and two, we're not reliant on it for our damage. They also did add a new node to add electrocute stuff in, and that node is I don't have gameplay of it, but it's right next to where we're already spec'd, and it has a bunch of extra lightning damage from it, so we might end up spec'ing to that to get even more damage. But the actual shock stuff that we're doing is not affected by this at all. So to start, just some general improvements. One big thing is that they're adding the ability to fast travel between areas in maps, which should be pretty nice. And they're also making it significantly cheaper to respec, which is going to be very interesting because some of the things that they've buffed for Rangers could potentially warrant a respec to change around, just to mess around with a totally new build. And then there's some other quality of life improvements there. For endgame and monster balances, I'm not going to read through everything here, but basically they are nerfing some of the BS that was killing us really quickly. Chaos damage now scales less aggressively over the endgame from monsters, and monsters, when they crit us and hit us really hard, are going to be critting for less, so it should lead to less random one-shots. And there's also going to be less additional elemental resistance penalties at tier 6 and tier 11 and higher. Basically, you're losing even more resistances the higher you are going in maps, so now it should be easier to cap our resistances. Sorry, that's a hard word for me to say for some reason. They also are nerfing a bunch of the trial stuff, and the trials and getting your ascendancy points should be a bit easier now. There's going to be less BS from some of the enemies and less damage taken. There's some more things for ranged or for melee damage to take 35% less honor damage when close range, which might mean that we want to play a little bit closer when we're doing our bow stuff, but we'll have to see. I got to get my 4th ascendancy point once these changes go live. And then we get to the big stuff, which is skill changes. The first stuff to talk about is Ice Shot Shards. Secondary now gains additional projectiles as it levels up. So Ice Shot currently is shooting 3 shards, I think it is, when you shoot. Now it's going to be gaining more additional shards as it levels up, which should be awesome. In addition, it now targets within a 90-degree cone. I think before it was doing about a 45-degree. So now it's going to be hitting in a much larger radius. So Ice Shot's getting more projectiles, more radius. Ice Shot Shards now travel further. So they're going to be going... or Ice Shot Shards now travel further base distance. The arrows and projectiles are now smaller and are the same size as other arrows. So basically, Ice Shot's going to be doing more damage and hitting in a larger area. Should be pretty nice. Electrocuting arrows base duration was changed to 25 seconds from 12, doubling quality bonuses. Barrage, this is very interesting, especially for frenzy stuff. Barrage is going to get 25% less damage on barrage attacks from 60% less, meaning that it's going to be more useful for firing damage from these, because there's such a massive damage penalty if you're using barrage to proc things. Barrage now also does a base repeat of 2 times, so you're going to fire your attack an additional time from when it was before. Shock Chain Arrows Shockwaves now deal 100% more damage. This is very interesting. I didn't really mess around with this skill too much. It just didn't feel very good, but it's basically getting buffed by 100% damage. We're already playing currently, or at least I am playing a shock build, Lightning Arrow Deadeye, so could be a new skill to pivot to if you wanted to mess around with that. Sniper's Mark, which you get crit damage on enemies and get guaranteed frenzy charges when you're critting them. Its base was reduced from 6 seconds to 2 seconds, so a lot faster to generate frenzy charges. And Combat Frenzy is now going to give us the ability to get a frenzy charge every 1.5 seconds, where he was starting at 7 seconds. So both Frenzy Generation from Sniper's Mark and Combat Frenzy is going to be massively buffed. Stormcaller's Arrow Bolts now gain additional impact radius as it levels. Could potentially see this used a bit more as like an AoE skill because it's going to be hitting in a larger radius. Vine Arrow's damage over time has been adjusted. If you didn't see one of the clips, I think it was posted by Jung Grown, where Vine Arrow, if you get a bunch of levels on it, was just scaling exponential damage and was doing millions of damage a second. This has now been adjusted. It's now slightly higher at lower levels and substantially lower at higher levels. The intention of this ability was that you poisons for it to spread poisons, as opposed to the vine itself dealing immense amounts of damage. So going to be more back to its role as a utility skill rather than a damage skill. Tornado Shot's damage over time has also been adjusted. It's now slightly higher at lower levels and substantially lower at higher levels. The intention of this ability was to propagate your other bow skills as opposed to doing an immense amount of damage itself. I didn't actually see anything about this. It's very interesting that Tornado Shot might have been like a powerful damage over time ability. Magnetic Salvo can now only use your lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your other party members. People were cheesing bosses by firing like a bazillion lightning arrow rods, and then one person was casting Magnetic Salvo, and you could just like rain down damage with that. And that is kind of like some of the bigger changes to our bow skills. The other really big change to Ranger has to do with the Pathfinder's Ascendancy node for the concoction skills. If you didn't know, Pathfinder gets a point where you can grab concoctions, which are like potions that you throw. You could pick between like bleed, poison, electric, and a bunch of others. And they made a massive change to them. Concoction skills from the Ascendancy class now consume 3 charges from Mana Flask from 5, so you're consuming less. Their damage has been increased, and they deal approximately 66% more damage when the skill is level 20. In addition, the base added damage has been increased by at least 50% for all concoction skills, with poison and bleeding receiving greater damage buffs. Fulminating Concoction now has a crit strike chance of 8% from 6%. Shattering Concoction now has a crit strike chance of 1% from 7%. And Explosive Concoction has a 100% more chance to ignite enemies and 100% more magnitude of ignites inflicted. Fulminating Concoction now has a 100% more chance to inflict shock, and Shattering Concoction now has a 100% more phrase buildup. Basically, they buffed the daylights out of the concoction skills. The fact that they're going to get 66% more damage, and they're also going to get 50% like additional damage from base added damage, seems pretty crazy. I heard that these skills were already good before. I might be queuing up a Poison Pathfinder up next with concoction skills. Could be really, really cool. But yeah, very interesting that the concoction skills are basically all getting buffed. I obviously think that Poison has a lot of synergy with Pathfinder, but maybe there's going to be some skills and builds going like some of the bleed concoctions or ignite concoctions and see like little hybrid builds. And the other like big thing that's interesting for us is they're adding a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree between Ranger and Monk sections. Monk is like kind of top right, like 3 o'clock on the tree. That's something that we're like a little bit close to. So we might be picking up a new area in our skill tree. We'll have to wait for like the patch to actually go live to see how good it is. But if we are, I will definitely be updating our build guide. To support balances, there's actually a fair bit of interesting things. The fire exposure, lightning exposure, and cold exposure gems no longer penalize damage, but they now cost more mana. Them not making it penalized damage is very, very interesting. Might be able to use that on like your main damage skill. The Electrocute support no longer penalizes damage. Instead, it now prevents the supported skill from being able to shock. Envenom support now grants 50% chance to poison from 60%. We've got some interesting ones here with mobility support. This is something that I was originally using on Lightning Arrow, but took off because it was making us lose a ton of damage. It now has no damage penalty, but you move. It applies like 30% less movement speed penalty from 40%. So now we can use this and just like could use this as like a support for mapping, where you're gonna be able to move around a whole lot faster with Lightning Arrow and not lose any damage from that. So that could be really interesting, and then like take that off for bossing. We've also got the Ricochet support now has a 40% chance to chain from terrain from 20%, so they just doubled that. And the rest of these changes aren't really... Ferocity support now has a 40% more skill speed when consuming a Frenzy Charge from 30%. There is a bit of a small nerf to something that we were using, which is they fixed a bug with Rising Tempest support where it was giving more damage per elemental skill used rather than more damage per elemental type. I pointed that out in my last video. It was giving us a ton of damage when we were using all lightning skills. So we are going to have to find a new kind of 6 length for our Lightning Arrow right now. because that is not going to be something that we can use anymore. There's also a very interesting note in here that says that they fixed a bug where Ice Shot was unable to cause freeze buildup. If I'm not mistaken, Ice Shot, like prior to the game launching, the skill description said that it couldn't cause freeze buildup, but it did more damage to frozen enemies. Apparently, when it got changed, that didn't actually get fixed. And so now Ice Shot will be able to freeze for itself, which means it's even more potential as a like main damage skill. So definitely looking into Ice Shot as a new kind of build for Deadeye. Guys, that's going to do it for the patch notes. I'll link the full thing down in the description if you want to check it out. Obviously, there's a ton of things that I didn't read through here that just don't really like super apply to us. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.